The alarms weren't ours. They belonged to the Carina gate, a silver Taurus the size of a continent, lurching like a wounded animal against the black. On Lightfall's bridge, every surface hummed under Deshaun Cole's hands as he feathered thrust to keep us inside the shadow of an ice boulder. Cloak held, for now. Conclave traffic shows a quarantine ring, Navid Ortiz said, fingers dancing over spectral analysis. Automated, inertial fences, no ships in reach for 12 hours. Their bulletin says, do not approach, gate lens is entering runaway. Runaway means explosion, I asked. Dr. Amara Chen tilted her head, eyes catching starlight. Not explosion, lens collapse, it'll shear every ship within 2 light minutes into spaghetti math doesn't have metaphors for. Engineer Kiyomi Sato whistled low. Charming. We weren't supposed to be here. Watch, record, don't change the board, Earth had told us. A 2-century habit. It keeps wars smaller and secrets safer. But across our forward screen, you could see evac beacons blinking like drowned fireflies along the gate's inner habs. Families inside a ring that was forgetting how to be geometry. Conclave rescue? I asked. Nearest fleet is 8 jumps out, Navid said. And HQ just sent the classic, hold position, await instructions. I thought about Dunkirk, not the heroism on posters, but the logistics of little boats, of civic duty weaponized into a corridor. I thought about Midway, about how sometimes the trick no one expects is the one that turns history. Ethics classes call it proportionality. My grandmother called it neighborliness. If you can pull someone from a burning kitchen without burning down the block, you do it. Then you go to the town hall and explain. Captain O'Keefe? Raj Patel, my Zoe, didn't push. He knew the look. I let the silence stretch until Lightfall's heartbeat synced with mine. Break radio silence, I said. We're going in. Cole slid us out from the ice shadow like a cat leaving a windowsill. Our cloak rippled as the gate's graviton harmonics licked at the hull. Chen called out numbers. Sato soldered a theory into the comms rack. Navid opened a narrowband at an angle only a petty god would think to use. This is the independent relief vessel Lightfall, I said, voice steady. Carina gate control, your lens is pre-cascading. We have field expertise. We request permission to render aid. Static, then a voice like glass chimes beaten by wind. This is Director Serith of Carina Operations. Whoever you are, turn away. The lens is in chorus. We cannot anchor it. Amara leaned closer to the mic. Director Serith, Dr. Chen speaking. Your lens is shifting into a Bose-Einstein grading pattern. Your dampers are fighting harmonics instead of phase. Give me access to your node map and I can retune 3 arcs to buy you an hour. Silence. Then incredulous. Humans? Raj exhaled through his nose. Secrets crack on the smallest edges. I kept my voice even. Neighbors who know a thing or two about broken kitchens. Another beat, then hastily, sending node map, we have 120,000 residents on inner habs, our tugs can't approach. Understood, I said, we'll make you a corridor. Ma'am, Cole said softly, we don't have a corridor. We'll make one, I repeated. Kiyomi, I want the light sailors. She blinked. Debris kites, those are prototypes. Every kite is a mirror with an attitude. We stitch them into a ribbon and throw it across the worst shear. Old sailors in Terran hurricanes called it a drogue, give the sea something else to bite. Sato's grin flashed like a flare. Copy that, sewing the sky. Amara murmured, we'll need a song to hold the stitches. Excuse me, Raj asked. Not literal, a control lattice, she said. Phase pulses that tell the gate what rhythm we want. The conclave algorithms will try to help and ruin it. We need a pattern they won't recognize. Navid's smile turned sly. I've been waiting my whole life to weaponize a jazz chart. Make it clean, I said. No one gets hurt by our cleverness. Chen's thumbs hovered over the console, then struck. Lightfall bled a chain of soft sail kites from her belly, silver petals catching savage gravity. On my order, Cole spun us into a knife-edge pass, and the kites unfurled into a glittering ribbon that began to drag the worst of the shear into a groove. Navid's song, a timing pattern cribbed from syncopations he swore Coltrane would have approved, told the lattice when to tense and when to breathe. Corridor opening, Amara said. 2 minutes of relative calm every 9 minutes, marching around the ring like a slow heartbeat. Director Sarith's voice came thin and hopeful. We can launch lifeboats in those gaps. Good. I said, launch on the downbeat. Our cloak fell with the first burst of power. Conclave sensors would see us now. Around the far limb of the Taurus, quarantine guns woke, their optics swiveling like suspicious eyes. Raj met my gaze. Once they know we're here, everyone else will. Then we better be the kind of story worth repeating, I said. Captain, Navid warned, we've got a new contact. Conclave enforcement cutting in fast. Cole angled the ship to show them our smallest cross-section. Chen's numbers started to slope ugly again. The ring groaned through the vacuum on our hull mics, a sound like a world chewing glass. Hold the song, I ordered, and tell enforcement we're busy. The first wave of lifeboats leapt into our corridor like sparks from a wheel. That was when enforcement pinged us on a beam bright enough to sear the paint. Unregistered human vessel, the voice said, crisp as a blade. Power down and prepare to be boarded. After the downbeat, I whispered, as the gate's inner rim cracked and a new harmonic screamed across our boards. The enforcement cruiser looked like a cathedral built to intimidate math, black shards and crimson veins, its silhouette the kind of geometry that made prey animals freeze. It braked hard against the gate's gravity tides and held station 1,000 clicks out, weapons cold but very awake. This is Prefect Serev of Conclave Enforcement, the blade voice said again. You're trespassing inside a cordon. Power down. Prefect, I answered. We're stabilizing Carina's lens and shepherding civilians. If we power down, your evac window's close. Your presence violates the doctrine that a closed sign is a shield against catastrophe, I said, keeping anger wrapped in velvet. Prefect, in Earth history we had a thing called the Civil Rights Movement. People built entire logistics networks to move bodies and bread through hostile systems. Law and life aren't always aligned. A pause. I pictured a jaw set under ceremonial metal. You presume much. We presume responsibility, Raj said calmly and cut the line. Amara didn't look up from the node map. I can buy us 30 minutes if you let me turn on the Sibyl. Sato's hands stilled over her soldering wand. The Sibyl was the war baby sleeping in Lightfall's memory, our predictive engine, shackled under more ethics code than a philosophy department. If we light it, we're publishing the sherbet recipe, Kiyomi said. Conclave will know we bake. Then we use it once, I said, under constraints. My grandmother's voice again. A tool is just a tool. Virtue sits in the hands. Chen, limited horizon, no external learning, and you brief me every 60 seconds. Copy. Amara's face went very still the way she did when riding the deep currents. Sibyl online, forecasting. Her projections rolled across the glass, wavelets of possible futures converging on 3 critical arcs. The gate's Upper East dampers, a failure in Arc 12, and a resonance mode no conclave graph had names for. She tapped a sequence that would look like nonsense to the uninitiated, and our song shifted time's signature. The corridor thickened as if a river had accepted a new bank. Window 4 is clean, Navid reported, all leaking into his voice. Boats moving. Signal the inner habs that children and medical go first, Raj said. Use English or we'll jam conclave phrasing. Use O Adam, Navid countered. Plains code analog. It kept traffic safe once when radios weren't. The Navajo code talkers, I said. Context, World War Roman II, soldiers use their own language as a cipher, not magic, just community leveraged as geometry. Sato snapped a clip and hissed as it singed her finger. Captain, the kites are fraying along string 5. I can reinforce, but I need a stitch point on the gate itself. Director Sarith, I called. We need to anchor a drone to your beam coil at Sector J6. It will clamp and sing with us. You can't interfere with live coils, came the horrified answer. It's against protocol, I know, I said, softer. It's also how we keep your ring from shredding your people. A beat, the sound of someone choosing a future. Permission granted, Sarith said, voice threadbare. If we survive, you'll submit the method for review. If we survive, I'll write you a paper, Amara murmured, launching the clamp drone. On our periphery, the enforcement cruiser kept posture, hands on hips, pistol holstered but visible. Prefect Serev pinged again. You light an unregistered heuristic engine and we will treat you as hostile. Noted, Raj said, killing the beam. The drone bit the beam coil. Our lattice stopped fluttering and started to pay attention to itself. Chen smiled with half her mouth. That's more like it. Then Arc 12 let go. You don't hear a structure that size, tier. You feel it. The way your stomach knows when a bridge is wrong. A slice of the ring peeled back like a hangnail. The corridor buckled, and 18 lifeboats skated at the edge of death, their skins bowing from sheer. Cole threw Lightfall through a slot I would have sworn didn't exist and parked us between the worst of it and the boats. Our hull groaned, paint atomized into glitter. Hold, I said, teeth clenched. Sybil? Options are ugly, Amara said, voice steady because I needed it steady. We can kick the gate into a controlled partial, bleed the lens into space and rebuild it later. Or we can keep this patched mess going and risk a full chorus. Casualties? Raj asked. Partial, local damage, outer habitats evacuated, long rebuild. Full chorus, nothing within the gate's light dies clean. Just war theory says you pick the path with proportional harm and discriminatory protection. You save as many non-combatants as the universe allows. Ethics are math-flavored with mercy. Director Sereth, I said, authorize partial. You'll lose a piece of your crown, you'll keep your people. Sereth's laugh was a cracked bell. Do it. Prefect Serev, I added, opening a beam I knew he'd see. We're going to injure your gate to save your citizens. That's the whole sentence. Another human would have sworn Serev just inhaled. Proceed and you will answer for property destruction. Gladly, I said. Amara stabbed the grid. Our song rose, a clean, defiant line. The gate shuddered as we bled the lens into the dark in a bright scarf, unweaving a century of conclave pride one thread at a time. Boats poured through our corridor, and our kites burned themselves threadbare to keep it open. When the light cleared, a quadrant of the ring hung limp and dead but stable. Our boards cooled. The howl in the hull faded to a tremor. Windows are holding, Navid said hoarsely. Evac continuing. Captain, Cole said quiet and wrong, new gravity signatures inbound. He threw the image wide. Beyond the far edge of the system, dots like bruises seeped into space, fields that didn't care what geometry meant. Amara whispered, that's not conclave, that's a bloom. The word tasted like ash. We'd read reports, autophages, things that ate infrastructure and sang bad songs. Prefect Serev, I said, call your fleet, we're not done. The first evac wave cleared the gates more just as the Bloom's scouts slid into comet shadow. They looked like nothing particular, smudges that ate starlight and bent math. Every conclave briefing called them by a different polite terror. Earth sailors once painted eyes on their prows, not because the sea cared, but because people did. We needed our own superstition. Assign symbols, Raj said. Let the pilots name the first 20 with something they can hate without hating themselves. On it, Navid said, painting nicknames in tight beam, tangle, pitch, locust, maw. We broke Lightfall's belly open and released everything shaped like a rescue. Micro-cutters, tugs, sail kites that had one more verse in them. Cole sliced lanes through the debris and gravity surf, and Deshawn's calm turned the bridge into a pocket of sanity. Window in 3-2 mark. Launch 9. The gate responded like an injured city that remembered it had neighbors. Conclave tug pilots, scaled, feathered, gas-bagged, all improvisation under pressure, fell into our rhythm because rhythm is older than language. Their lifeboats looked like pockets and seeds. Ours looked like coffins redesigned by optimists. We chained them into a leapfrog. Big ship throws small ship forward, small ship throws message back, corridor breathes, repeat. Dunkirk without water, but with the same math of grace. The Bloom probed our edge, curious. One scout nosed toward a lifeboat named Pomegranate and touched the hull with a caress that flensed sensors. The boat wobbled. Our lattice snarled and tried to bite back. Amara's hands were already on the board, shifting our song to an ugly key that made my molars ache. The scout recoiled. It learns, she said, but so do we. Sybil pulsed a warning, an emergent cluster coalescing near the enforcement cruiser. Prefect Serev, to his credit, did not blink. He snapped his cathedral like a whip, lancing microgravity splinters into the gap, trying to herd the thing away from his own wounded. It curved around his shots like silk around a blade and kept coming. "Permission to assist the person pointing the big gun at us?" Raj asked. "Granted," I said, and Lightfall belted a burst of tuned haze straight into the cluster's belly. It hiccuped, stalled, and for one beautiful second our corridor felt like a real hallway, not a prayer. "Prefect," I said on a tight beam, "if you've got a commander who can speak without shouting, put them on." Serev appeared on my forward glass, jagged helm off. He was older than his armor implied, eyes tired in a way that has nothing to do with sleep. "Captain O'Keefe." "Mara, this will go faster with names." "Mara," he said, cautious as a climber testing ice. "Your techniques are unorthodox." "Orthodoxy is a luxury when the house is on fire," I said. "We need joint command. My people can run lattice and small craft coordination. You hold outer defense. You presume—" "We presume that our dead look the same in a ledger," I snapped, then softened. "Prefect, the bloom will adapt to your beams in 13 minutes. It eats patterns. We need to stop feeding it one diet." A pause, then Serev nodded once. "Joint command." On the inner habs, the last holdouts began to move, the ones who didn't trust anyone enough to leave their kitchens. We opened a narrow cast line for fear and let it talk. Raj told a story about a ferry in a hurricane, about how courage is sometimes just agreeing to sit next to a stranger. Conclave operators added their own, stories of migration and failed harvests, and the year the gate sang too loud and they slept in the ducts. The bloom pressed harder, finding the shape of our rhythm. Navid swore softly. "It's starting to hear the jazz." "Then we change genres," I said. "Kiyomi." She slid a cartridge into the transmitter with a reverence that made me grin despite myself. "Let's see how it likes woodblock patterns from Okinawa festivals." The lattice hiccuped, then found the beat. The bloom hesitated, as if offended. Pomegranate cleared the corridor and spun under a tug's belly. The pilots cheered on 20 different channels, and for an instant the sound made the bridge feel like a kitchen at a good wake. Sybil whispered again, a new vector, high Delta V inbound from behind Conclave's quarantine ring, contacts that flashed on our board as flat triangles, human, not ours. Amara's eyes widened. Somebody else broke radio silence. "Who?" Raj asked. "Homesteaders," Navid said, reading their tags. "Outer belt folks, independents with opinions." On the glass, a brace of ships slid out from behind an asteroid that had been a neighborhood for 3 generations. They wore mismatched armor and bright paint, civic pride glinting under grime. The lead ship hailed us on a channel like a street corner. "Lightfall, this is Lumen Cooperative. We heard the noise. We brought boats." "God, I love us. Fall in on Vector 6, I said, heart too full for the professional calm. "Mind the sheer, dance on the 4th beat." "It's a square dance, then," the Lumen captain replied, laughing in the voice of someone who knew engines, and she swung her craft into our rhythm as if she'd practiced for years. We held that bright, imperfect ballet for 7 more windows. People crossed the terrible threshold from home to away. On the 8th, something in the bloom decided that corridors were rude. It yanked the gate's dead quadrant like a tablecloth. Alarms sang. The corridor collapsed. "New plan," I said, but the words drowned under a new signature, big, close, and carrying a melody that was ours. Raj stared. "By every saint!" Across the dark, light stepped out of hiding. 20, then 30, then 50 hulls unscrolling out of rock and shadow, paint matte and confidence quiet. Our observation flotilla had come to the party and shed their veils. Some part of me broke and reknit in the same heartbeat. I opened a general channel. "This is Captain Mara O'Keefe. Lightfall requests task org." A calm voice answered, familiar as thunder over prairie grass. "Task org granted," Admiral Alina Voigt said. "And Mara, let's keep the kitchen intact." Admiral Voigt's flag rode the spine of Antikythera, a carrier that looked too graceful to be so mean. She didn't posture, she didn't need to. The flotilla slid into place the way good teams do. No speeches, no horns, just the quiet noise of competence. Conclave ships, bruised and proud, shifted to make room. Serev's cathedral tucked in alongside Voight's shark, and for a heartbeat I saw a future that might be worth all the broken dishes. "Lightfall, you hold lattice and evac control," Voight said. "Task Force Kintsugi," she named it without irony, "will pour gold into the cracks. Conclave outer wall, you take the bloom's leading edge. No friendly fire, please." "Agreed," Serev said. His tone had lost some edges. Amara briefed fast and narrow. "Bloom learns waveforms. We counter with change. We'll run rotating control patterns cribbed from non-digital traditions, drum cycles, hawketed chant, marching cadences. The point isn't magic, it's denying it a stable meal." "Just war," Raj murmured. "Discriminate, proportionate. Last resort, but when we swing, swing to end it." "We'll try a Doolittle first," Cole said, half grin, half grim. "Hit the unhittable to rattle the room." "Don't talk me into history," I said, but my mouth betrayed me and smiled back. "Okay, Kintsugi line, we chain micro-warps across the Bloom's spine. Each ship opens a pocket, pours the bad song into a jar, and the next ship slams the lid. Like Kintsugi, we accept the break and make a better seam." "That requires ships to sit in the teeth," Sado said. "We'll lose hull paint, maybe hulls." "Victories should cost," Voight said, like the weather. "We keep the cost human." Sybil nudged the edges of my mind with the kind of suggestion that comes from knowing you too well. The spear point needed to be small, fast, and willing. Lightfall fit the profile like a key. I didn't ask for volunteers. Leaders shouldn't. "Lightfall will carry the first jar," I said. "Antikythera takes the third. Conclave Cathedral takes the fifth. Homesteaders fill the gaps where they can." "Copy," Serev said without a lecture. "Progress." "Raj," I said, "you have the evac grid if I can't talk." "I prefer when you can," he said, and didn't try to make me promise to come back. That's found family, not the coercive softness of "don't go," but the clean hope of "we'll keep the porch light on." We angled Lightfall toward the Bloom's densest seam. It felt like lining up on a tornado with a mason jar and a stubborn prayer. Navid fed the transmitter a drum line out of West African harvest festivals. The lattice thrummed like an old friend trying not to cry. Amara set the jar math. Kiyomi whispered to the kites. Cole made the ship into an answer. Behind us, Voight's line formed. Ships of Earth and Homestead, and everything in between painting themselves with the gold of intention. Conclave craft slid into place, and Serev's cathedral bared its teeth not at us, but at the thing that wanted to eat the meaning out of engines. "Ready," Amara said. "On your mark." I looked at the gate, the quadrant we'd killed on purpose, the three-quarters still singing, the boats like seeds and the tugs like bees. I thought about the Navajo code talkers and the Dunkirk skippers and the quiet math of midwives. Philosophy textbooks wrap courage in Latin. On ships and in kitchens, it sounds like a single word. "Mark," I said. Lightfall dove. The Bloom's skin rippled as our jar opened and began to drink. It tasted like burnt sugar and bad dreams. The ship shuddered, the kites screamed, the drum line stumbled and found its feet again. Behind us, Antikythera's jar thumped into place and the seam glowed gold, temporary and real, and Serev's cathedral held the mouth of hell open with sacrilege and duty. "Jar at 80%, Amara said. "Hullet, don't ask." "I like our paint the way it was," Kiyomi muttered, tears she'd deny later bright in her voice. "Hold," I said, and then we weren't holding. We were riding the kind of wave surfers only brag about after they've healed. The jar swelled, the Bloom leaned, and in that lean I saw the shape of the thing's attention. It shifted it, not to us, but to the gate. "Mara," Raj said in my ear, "it's going to pull the remaining arcs until the corridor knots." "Voight," I asked. "Busy," she said. "We can't get there in time." I looked at the gate's map, at a weak seam we could tug, at a sacrifice we could make to keep the kitchen from burning. The choice bloomed with awful clarity. "New plan," I said, voice steady because it had to be. "We take the jar through the weak seam and let it crack behind us. The gate will scar, the corridor will live." "Probability of us living?" Cole asked, casual. "Non-zero," Amara said, "but only because I am an optimist." "Prefect Serev," I said, "we're about to do something you'll either give us medals for or indict us over." Both are paperwork, he replied, voice like a blade finding purpose. Do it. Lightfall tipped her nose toward the seam. The kites tightened. The jar sang. Behind us, our found family held a line stitched with gold and necessity. We slipped into the crack just as the bloom exhaled. We fell through the seam like a bead on a broken string. Inside the gate's wound, the bloom wasn't a cloud so much as a wrong idea made visible, planes that refused to agree on what between meant, threads unspooling from a loom that disliked looms. Our jar, fat with stolen chorus, bulged against Lightfall's ribs. Every gauge shouted a different profanity. Jar at 96, Amara said, voice steady in the way that keeps other voices steady. Containment flexing. If it pops, we're a bright footnote, Kiyomi warned. I can vent along the kite filaments, bleed pressure into micro-warps. What's the price? I asked. She swallowed. Stealth mesh anneals. We'll never cloak again. We become a ship-shaped apology. Leadership is often picking which heirloom you smash to keep the kitchen from burning. Do it, I said. Sato's hands blurred. The kites sang a new chord and the jar exhaled through 1,000 bright pinpricks. Space turned into lace. Lightfall shuddered and then found her feet again the way a boxer does after tasting the canvas. Our hull temp fell a few cruel degrees. The corridor numbers on Raj's console steadied. Outside, in that impossible dark, the bloom's attention twitched like a cat who'd noticed the red dot was moving somewhere else. Bleed is holding, Kiyomi said, sagging into her harness. Say goodbye to our old tricks. I'll write them a letter, Navid said. Soft, tell them we used them well. Cole hung us on the line between two ugly choices and walked it. The gate groaned through our bones, a cathedral shifting its weight to spare a congregation. Behind us, evac boats kept hopping along the rhythm we'd bullied the world into. Ahead, the seam narrowed to a throat. Plot says we can slip it, Cole murmured almost to himself. If the bloom doesn't ask the seam to be somewhere else. The bloom is sampling us, Amara said, learning the taste of our song. That's fine, Raj said, not looking up. Songs have bridges. The seam pinched. Lightfall folded her wings the way swifts do at the last second, and we were through, ripping a slice of the bloom loose as the jar drank what it could and spat the rest into the lace. We burst back into normal wrong, gate shadow, kites flickering, jar a heaving animal caught in a net. Our boards cooled another notch. The corridor behind us glowed like a scratch filled with gold. Status? I asked. Evac is at 64%, Raj said. Conclave tugs and homesteader minis are cycling like they've rehearsed this all their lives. Admiral Voight reports Task Force Kintsugi holding the line, Navid added. Serev's cathedral took a bite. He says, quote, tell your engineer that was improvised genius. He refuses to elaborate. Frame that, Kiyomi muttered. Then the bloom showed us it had done its homework. A new chord rolled out from the far dark, the inverse of all the pretty patterns we'd thrown. It wasn't louder, it was emptier. Our lattice stumbled. The corridor thinned, boats wobbled, and two kissed the wall too hard and tumbled. Conclave tugs snagged them like mothers with fast hands, but fear spidered across the channels. Chorus collapse, Amara breathed. It's learned to cancel, it's riding silence in the shape of our music. Counter? I asked. She stared at Sybil's projections, then at the gate, then at me. We answer silence with truer silence. Navid frowned. As in no signal. As in the shape of human quiet, Amara said. A living rhythm that isn't algorithmic, a chorus of bodies at rest. Slow heartbeats, breaths, the micro-variants from nerves and hopes. The Navajo code talkers didn't just use words, they used a community's internal logic. We seed the bloom with something it can't generalize from, a particularity. If it tries, it loses coherence. Raj blinked. We'd be weaponizing nap time. More like vigil, Amara said. A vigil shaped into math. What's the delivery? I asked, already knowing I would hate the answer. A quiet lure, it needs a calibrating donor in real time, no recordings, a living mind under load to set the lattice in that paradox zone between pattern and noise. And where do we put the lure? In the kernel, close enough that we smell its breath. Cole exhaled through his teeth. So a shuttle run through that. He didn't look at the bloom, he didn't have to. What's the bill? Raj asked. Amara didn't flinch. The donor's neural pattern will smear, think concussion in the soul, memory loss, some functions may come back, some won't. Kiyomi shook her head hard. No, we can't trick the bloom into kindness, Amara said. We can ask it to choke on a truth it can't swallow, the truth of being this body on this day for these people. Who? Navid said too quickly. Then, quieter, who carries that? Me, I said, because the oldest, cleanest sentence I know is still I will go. No, Raj said, not loud, just anchored. You steer the room, I'll take the lure. Executive officers, I said, are named that because they execute plans, you're about to execute one. I softened my voice. I need your memory of every evac call sign intact. Then me, Cole said. I'm the one who makes bad ideas fly. I can fly that. The donor has to ride the line with the pilot, Amara said. The calibration needs proximity. Kiyomi lifted her chin. Then I go, you'll get it back, Cap. Whatever you can't remember, I'll keep for you. She grinned, tears chopping the light. Besides, someone has to make fun of Deshawn's flying while we're both awake. Unacceptable, Raj said, jaw tight enough to cut paper. We don't sacrifice the ones who make ships keep promises. A new voice cut in. Add me, Prefect Serev said, crisp over a private beam. 2 donors, redundancy, 1 human, 1 conclave, let the bloom taste coalition. He'd removed his helm again. He looked tired and very alive. Duty had taken the place of suspicion and found it better fitting. Serev, I started. I am an officer, he said, and a citizen of this place. My people will not say I hid in the choir loft while strangers sang in our nave. Amara's eyes flicked to Sybil's branching futures. 2 donors double stability. It halves the smear. It might even give us back most of you. Cole was already unstrapping. We don't have forever to argue. I glanced at Voight's feed, Antikythera stitched into the seam, her big jars flexing like lungs. Homesteader hulls limned in gold, tugs playing jazz with their lives, and in the dark the bloom inhaled for a note we did not want to hear. Go, I said. We launch on the downbeat. The shuttle bay cycled. Kiyomi touched her forehead to mine as we passed in the hatch. Leave the porch light on, she whispered. Always, I said, and watched the bay swallow them and felt the whole shape of the day lean on the courage of 2 people and a ship that no longer knew how to hide. The shuttle kicked free and knifed for the colonel, small against a wrongness that wanted to make everything small. The lure began to warm, and in my ear, for the last time before the pain, I heard Kiyomi laugh. The shuttle wore its shields like a raincoat in a wildfire, not sufficient, but better than bare skin. Cole threaded it along fault lines Sybil painted into the dark. The bloom flexed, trying to be everywhere we planned to be, and he did what good pilots do. He went where he hadn't planned. Approach vector is jelly, he panted, staying inside their blind elbows. Lure at 10%, Amara called, fingers locked on a string of invocations that were math and prayer. Donors, begin calibration. Prefect Serev's reply came first, his voice stripped of ceremony. Conclave duty cycles, breathing on the count of 8. Heart rate steady. Kiyomi followed, words chopped by turbulence. Human mess, counting off in 4s, thinking about the taste of mangoes in summer and how my grandma made rice in a cracked pot and said the crack made it lucky. Amara smiled despite the moment. Perfect. The bloom needs to taste specific. It can't generalize mangoes it never had. On the tactical, Antikythera flared a jar and pulled a seam toward herself like a scar she meant to own. Serev's cathedral held a notch open with pure obstinacy. Homesteaders wove rescue and harassment like one skill. The gate kept bleeding people into room that might not exist in an hour. Ethics classes talk about last resort like it's an abstract threshold. On the bridge it sounds like someone asking if we have one more friend to call. Lure at 30, Amara said. Colonel Shadow in 20 seconds. Copy, Cole grunted, rolling the shuttle into a knife edge through a gap that refused to admit it was a gap. The bloom's surface rippled and the shuttle's skin groaned as if it remembered trees bending in storm wind. Marcus Aurelius wrote about controlling only what is yours, Raj said softly into the open channel. You can't rule weather. You can steer a rudder and keep your word. That's all the job ever was. 50, Amara said. Noise floor coming up. Begin quiet. Silence shaped. I watched the graphs for the lure and watched something else too. A slow, irregular line that looked an awful lot like sleep right before a dream and right after a nightmare. It wasn't algorithmic. It was human and conclave laid together, the way voices layer in a vigil when everyone's sung out and they're just humming so no one has to carry the quiet alone. "Colonel Contact," Cole said. "It feels big." "Hold for 10, Amara said. 9, 8. The bloom flinched. A tendril thick as a building snapped at the shuttle with a playground bully's concentration, and Cole did a stupid, brilliant thing. He spun into it. The tendril overcommitted. The shuttle skipped like a stone and bit into the colonel's laminar edge. "Brag about that later," Kiyomi gasped, half laugh, half sob. 75, Amara said, fists white. "Calibration steady, the lure is riding, hush." The bloom reacted with an absence that hurt to think about. Our lattice dimmed, then steadied, then bent toward the shape we offered. The colonel's coherence sagged, as if a choir had been asked to sing a song none of them knew and a child had started humming something true. "Lure at 90, Amara said. "Almost." A knife of nothing cut through the calm net. The shuttle's telemetry spiked, then stepped off a cliff. "Deshawn?" I asked. "Kiyomi, prefect." Static, then a breath, then Serev, voice thin as paper. "Still here." "Kiyomi," I said, a giggle wrong around the edges and beloved anyway. I can hear my heart from far away. Amara's hands trembled. "We're at 100, the lure is locked." The bloom convulsed. Out on the line, Antikythera seemed flared gold as 1,000 tendrils lost the plot at once. Homesteader boats whooped. Conclave beams punched holes where there hadn't been holes. "The chorus is collapsing," Raj said, awe and fear braided tight. "It's working." "Get my people out," Voight snapped, voice suddenly close. "We're buying seconds, spend them." On the tactical, the shuttle hung in the colonel like a tooth in gum. The lure pulsed with 2 heartbeats. The bloom's attention swarmed that point with a lover's hunger. "Extraction?" I asked. Amara's jaw clenched. "If we pull now, the lure unhooks. It has to sit in the hush 6 more minutes or the colonel will reassemble around the absence. 6 minutes is 1,000 years when your hand is in a fire." "Copy," I said. "We hold." The bloom, denied a pattern it could own, reached for pettier theft. It clawed at the gate's outer arcs and at the ships that held our line. Homesteader hulls went dark mid-sheer. Conclave scouts burned and kept reporting until their dishes were just bright confetti. Antikythera took a punch that would have broken a lesser carrier and answered with a seam like sunrise. 3 minutes, Amara said. "Hold the hush." "Quiet is not absence," Navid murmured. "It's a presence you choose." The colonel shuddered, the lure flickered, Serev's breathing hitched. Kiyomi said, "Hey, Cap, if I forget the way your coffee tastes, tell me it was too strong and you were proud of that." "Deal," I said, and the word felt like a pledge in a language older than ships. 1 minute, Amara said. "Hold." The lights on the bridge dimmed because the ship needed the power more than our eyes did. Somewhere deep in the hull something popped, not fatally, just a reminder that nothing we loved owed us permanence. "Now," Amara said, voice breaking. "Jar the hush, pull them out." "Voight?" I asked. "Cover's yours," she said, and the line opened like a door into rain. Antikythera and the cathedral made a street where there hadn't been one, roofs held out with will and math. The shuttle staggered, the bloom's kernel sloughing off it like stubborn molasses. Cole punched the engines. The lure's tether shrieked. For an instant, the shuttle was a bead balanced on the world's wobbliest string. "We have them," Voight said, cool like dogs at heel. "Now run." The shuttle ran, jaws of dark snapping inches behind. In the bay, med teams were waiting. Homesteader volunteers with clever hands, conclave techs who'd been enemies a day ago and were now whatever comes after neighbor. The inner doors blew and the shuttle kissed the deck hotter than Reg's allowed. I was already moving. Serev stumbled out first, stripped of armor, eyes bright with a thin, feral triumph. Kiyomi followed with help, laughing and crying like the same act. "Can you hear me?" I asked. She squinted, then grinned. "You're the one who eats peppermint gum like it's a vitamin." "I prefer not to be known," I said, and she made the face that meant both yes and later. Back on the glass, the bloom's chorus disintegrated. Tendrils lashed without harmony. Cohesion bled into stubborn, stupid hunger that we could kill. All ships, Voight said, the softness gone from her voice replaced by clean steel. General assault. Don't feed it patterns, feed it problems. Conclave ships moved like a people used to holding lines. Human hulls moved like kids on bikes in a parking lot at dusk, inventing games to keep the dark honest. The Lumen cooperative dove where big ships couldn't and came out scorched and whooping. We lost some. Names I will write, letters I will sign, families that will sit with casseroles that can't fix anything but keep hands busy for a night. Proportionality doesn't make casualty lists shorter. It makes them make sense. Evac past 90, Raj reported, breath tight, his console lit with too many alarms. We're losing the old corridor but gaining ground at the rim. The gate can't take another tug of war, Director Sarith warned, voice thin with the kind of math only administrators and surgeons have to carry. If you can end it now. History books write about Midway as surprise and code breaking. It was also fuel lines and luck and a decision to commit when the moment's window was scooting shut. We'd cracked the chorus. The bloom was stupid vicious. We could break it or it could break the gate. Last resort, I said, and the crew didn't need words to fill the space after. Lightfall's jar is still half full, Amara said. If we slam it into the kernel remnant, we can cork it while Voight sutures. But we don't get it back, Kiyomi finished for her rough. We'll be a ship with a hole where a heart was. Then we'll share hearts, Navid said. We're not alone. Prefect, I said, opening a channel. We need your cathedral on the seam. It won't survive full exposure. Serev, strapped to a med cot and bristling with lines, turned his head to the pickup. My ship knows what it's for. I wanted to argue. He saw it and spared me. Sometimes the right thing is also the expensive thing, he said. You taught me that. Voight cut across us. Kintsugi on me, we stitch fast or not at all. Lightfall banked toward the colonel's last ugliness, jar blooming white gold in our belly. Antikythera opened a seam like a door. Conclave cruisers slotted into the hinge. Homesteaders threaded the lintel with a rope of decoy kites and insults. Punch it, I said. We punched. The jar hit the colonel like a lullaby sung by someone who refused to pretend everything was okay. The hush poured in and folded the wrongness around itself. The seam flared and Voight's lines slammed gold into the crack and kept it there. The cathedral drifted, its armor scales sloughing away. On the bridge feed, Serev didn't call for rescue. He looked at the gate, at the boat still moving, at the hulls stitched together by necessity, and smiled like a soldier seeing the dawn that will come after he's done. Prefect, I said. Captain, he answered, formal as a salute. Tell Director Sarith that the gate was never a crown, it was a bridge. He cut the channel and drove his dying ship into the seam to hold one last note. The bloom shivered, tried to grow a new chorus, found only hush, and began to die in ugly local ways. We harvested those pieces without joy. You don't gloat over a rabid dog, you end what it can do to your street. Evac complete, Raj whispered, voice shaking. All inner habs clear. Seam holds, Voight said. Begin burn down, no heroics, let work be work. We let it. When it was done, the gate's ring wore a scar across a quarter of its face, filled with a thread of gold where steel and silence had learned to agree. Antikythera floated with half her lights off. Homesteader hulls linked arms to tow the ones who couldn't limp. Lightfall hovered, jar gone, stealth gone, more honest than she'd ever been. Director Sarith appeared on our glass, eyes rimmed in salt. You have damaged Conclave property. I opened my mouth, but she raised a hand. And you have saved Conclave lives. We will settle the bill with honors and apologies on both sides. Her voice softened. Bring your dead, we will memorialize them with ours. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been renting. We'll come. Captain, Navid said, hand to his earpiece. Signals from outer systems. News traveled faster than we thought. Good or bad? I asked. He smiled, tired. Yes. They called it the Carina Accord because committees like tidy names. The signing happened 3 days after the bloom died under the arch of a gate that wore its scar without shame. On one side of the hall, conclave officials in fabrics that caught the light and soldiers with bandages neat under dress plates. On the other, Admiral Voight in a uniform that looked like it had never been new, homesteaders scrubbed but still greasy, my crew in borrowed jackets because the ones we'd brought smelled like the inside of a miracle. The Accords ink wasn't poetry. It was logistics. Shared lattice standards for chorus defense. Transparent registries for heuristic engines. The Sibyls we had promised ourselves to hide now declared, leashed by law and watched by friends. Evacuation protocols that assumed strangers would show up with boats. A joint body with a mouthful of a name, Kintsugi Corps, tasked with training crews to pour gold into cracks before they became chasms. Civilization is the agreements we make about what we won't abandon, Voight said, not into a microphone, but to Sereth and the room and the idea of the room. We've been good at building crowns. Let's build bridges. Sereth inclined her head. And kitchens, she said. I am told the best diplomacy tastes like stew. We held the memorial on an observation deck that had looked out over the rift, and then the bloom, and now stared at a scar that meant we'd chosen neighbors over monuments. Names scrolled. Ours and theirs. Homesteader call signs painted on sheet steel. Conclave families speaking in tones that turned air to glass. Children handed out candles with the industrial concentration kids apply to solemn grown-up things. When Serev's name came, a hush moved through the room like a tide. Sereth stepped forward and set a cathedral badge on the table, then touched Kiyomi's shoulder as if she'd been waiting for an excuse to be gentle. Kiyomi stood without help. Her memory was a quilt with a few squares missing. We'd stitch new ones in as we went. She took the mic and said, I don't remember all the math. I remember laughter in the shuttle when the world was wrong. I remember thinking that courage is just love applied to strangers. She looked at me and smirked, and I remember that my captain makes coffee like a war crime. Laughter cracked the room and remade it. Grief doesn't replace humor, it gives it an honest job. After policy people did the dance policy people must do. There were conclave houses that wanted us fined until we had to peel copper wire from our walls. There were human senators who wanted parades big enough to hide the bill. The homesteaders shrugged and went back to fixing things, because the bill always comes and work always waits. The Lumen Cooperative painted the seam in the gate on their hulls in gold leaf. When asked why, their captain said, to remember that broken and mended beats never broken and brittle. Voight declined to give speeches on news feeds. She sat in the Kintsugi Corps first class and listened more than she spoke. Amara turned the Sibyl from a secret into a syllabus. Her lecture slides alternating equations with case studies that included Midway's split-second fuel line decisions, and the way the Navajo code talker's particularity had saved lives. Raj wrote the handbook for evac logistics with examples from bus lines and church basements, because a good cue is a moral act. Navid designed a signal book that banned pretty rhythms. Cole taught kids in battered simulators how to ride seams without making poetry about it. And Kiyomi started a side clinic in the bay where she tuned engines and told scared pilots jokes until their hands stopped shaking. Lightfall sat in dry dock while Conclave and Homesteader welders argued in 3 languages about how to make her hull better. Her stealth was gone. We painted her anyway, white, with a gold seam down her flank, and a small stenciled peppermint near the bridge because crews deserve their inside jokes writ large. On the day we were due to depart, Sereth walked the length of our deck and stopped where the scar crossed the paint. Captain O'Keefe, she said. Mara, I told her, because it's hard to sign an accord with someone you won't let use your name. Mara, she corrected herself carefully. There will be houses in my conclave who will make you an enemy because it is easier than admitting we were ignorant. There will be voices on your earth who will make us children because that absolves them of listening. This accord won't quiet them. She glanced at the gate, a ring that would forever from now on be itself and all the days it had survived. But it will outlast them. I thought about stoic apothegms and just wore footnotes and how none of it tastes like coffee at 3 a.m. when you're choosing which gear to throw overboard. The only good contracts, I said, are the ones that make you better on your worst day. Then let us have many worse days, she said, and smiled in a way that had teeth but not for me. As we cleared Carina's shadow, a message pinged the general net. A small station on the far Perseus fringe had gone quiet. Someone had sent a picture, a click glass of a sky with a smear in it like a greasy thumb wrong around the edges. The room on the bridge went quiet for the right reason. Navid sighed. No rest for the stubborn. Good, Voight said on the shared channel, dry as a bone. Stubborn keeps kitchens open. I looked at my crew. At Raj's steady hands, at Amara's tired brilliance, at Cole's ordinary heroism, at Navid's dancing mind, at Kiyomi's grin stitched from new cloth. Found family, civic duty, coalition building. The themes sound like chalkboard words until you strap in. Set course, I said. Use the scar as our compass. Lightfall turned her honest face toward the smear. Behind us, the gate sang on a new key, a chorus of human and conclave, homesteader and official, jazz and drum and hush. Ahead, work. Between the thin gold line we keep painting, one seam at a time. And somewhere, at a kitchen table that's also a bridge, somebody put on a pot of stew because that's what you do when a message says, coming in hot.